Good afternoon. This is All India Radio. I am Valsa Williams and with me is Reshma Tiwari with the Midday News. The headlines. Campaigning comes to a close at 6 p.m. this evening for single-phase assembly polls in Uttarakhand and Goa and second phase of voting in Uttar Pradesh. Support for marginalized individuals for livelihood and enterprise SMILE scheme launched in New Delhi. The central scheme to provide welfare measures to transgenders and people engaged in the act of begging. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds talks with Australian counterpart Marie Spain, discusses wide range of bilateral issues. U.S. announces Indo-Pacific strategy to support India's continued rise and regional leadership, expresses concern over Chinese role in the region. India says motivated comments by some countries on dress code in some educational institutions in Karnataka are not welcome. An assistant commandant of CRPF killed and one Jawan injured in an encounter with Maoists in Chhattisgarh. Nationwide COVID vaccination drive reaches over 172 crore 29 lakh doses mark. And in women's cricket, New Zealand defeat India by 62 runs in the first ODI at Queenstown. With the new Omicron variant of coronavirus causing concern, we appeal to our listeners to be vigilant and to get fully vaccinated and help others, including children between 15 and 18 years, to get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. The high-pitched electoral campaign is reaching a crescendo on the concluding day of electioneering today for single-phase polls in Goa and Uttarakhand and for second phase of 7th-phase assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Campaigning will come to an end this evening. During the second phase of polls in Uttar Pradesh, 586 candidates are in the fray for 55 assembly seats, while 301 candidates are contesting for 40 seats in the single-phase polls in Goa and 632 candidates are vying for 70 seats in Uttarakhand. Polling will be held on Monday, the 14th of February. In Goa, campaigning will come to an end at 6 p.m. this evening. Political leaders of BJP, Congress, TMC and Aam Aadmi Party are making last-ditch efforts to woo the voters. Our correspondent covering Goa elections has filed this report.
Addressing election meetings in Goa, BJP National President JP Nadda exhorted people to vote in favor of party candidates to speed up development of Goa. Mr. Nadda said only BJP can fulfill dreams of golden Goa. Senior BJP leader Smriti Irani said the party takes care of every section of society, but opposition parties including Congress consider caste and religion before doing any work. Senior Congress leader Rahul Gandhi said BJP never talks about core issues of Goa. Aam Aadmi Party convener and Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal called upon people of Goa not to waste their vote and to vote for AAP if they want Goa to develop under an honest government. TMC leader Susmita Dev appealed people to teach a lesson to defectors. Leaders of NCP and Shiv Sena also hold door-to-door meeting to attract electorate. Krishna Kumar Lal, AIR News, Panji, Goa.
In Uttarakhand, star campaigners of all political parties are holding public rallies as campaigning comes to a close this evening for all 70 assembly seats in the state. Prime Minister and senior BJP leader Narendra Modi, Union Minister Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, Congress senior leader Priyanka Gandhi, Dipendra Singh Hooda and other senior leaders of major political parties are campaigning in the state today. More from our Dehradun correspondent.
As political campaigning for all 70 assembly seats is going to end this evening, all major political bigwigs are campaigning for their candidates in the state. Union Minister and senior BJP leader Amit Shah is addressing a public rally in Dehradun today, whereas UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has addressed a public rally in Tehri. However, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address a public rally at Rudhpur soon. Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi addressing a public rally in Khatima. Meanwhile, AAP, BSP, including regional party UKD and others are asking the voters to vote for change of power in the state. Raghavesh Pandey, PIR News, Dehradun.
Intense poll campaign is also going on in full swing for the single-phase polls in Punjab on the 20th of this month, which is coinciding with the third phase polling in UP. In Punjab, total 1,304 candidates are in the fray for 117 assembly constituencies. Maximum 19 candidates each are vying for Sahnewal and Patiala seats, while minimum 5 candidates are in the fray for Deen Nagar seat. Our Chandigarh correspondent reports that in Punjab, the candidates with criminal cases have risen by almost 3 times for the ensuing assembly elections. A report.
The Association for Democratic Reforms and Punjab Election Watch claimed of the 1,276 candidates analyzed, 315 or 25% have declared criminal cases against them. In the last 2017 assembly elections, the figure was under. Among the 315 candidates, 65 belong to the Shromani Akali Dal, 58 to Aam Aadmi Party, 27 to Bharatiya Janata Party, 16 to Congress, 4 to Shromani Akali Dal Sanyukt and 3 each to Bahujan Samaj Party and Punjab Lok Congress. At least 218 candidates have cases with serious offences. Besides this, 15 candidates have declared cases related to crime against women, including 2 of rape. 4 candidates have cases related to murder, while 33 have attempt to murder charges against them. Ashwini Kumar Sharma, PIR News, Chandigarh.
In UP, 59 assembly constituencies from 16 districts will go to polls in the third phase. Star campaigners and prominent leaders of various political parties are engaged in public rallies after finalization of candidates for 4 phases in Uttar Pradesh. Door-to-door canvassing and virtual appeals to voters also continue. Meanwhile, the scenario of electoral battle for the 5th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh and the first of 2-phase polling in Manipur has now become clear after withdrawal of candidature last evening. Mostly multi-cornered contests are on the cards. In UP, there are total 692 candidates in the fray for 61 assembly seats. In Manipur, there are 173 candidates contesting for 38 seats. The filing of nominations for the 6th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh as well as the second and last phase polling in Manipur closed yesterday. The scrutiny of nominations will be undertaken on Monday. The last date for withdrawal of candidature will be the 16th of February. The process of filing nominations for the 7th and last phase of assembly polls in Uttar Pradesh is presently underway.
In West Bengal, polling is underway in 4 municipal corporations, Bidhan Nagar, Asansol, Chandan Nagar and Siliguri today. Voting began at 7 a.m. and will continue till 5 p.m. Poll percentage up to 11 a.m. was recorded at 29.81 in Bidhan Nagar, in Siliguri 28.07, in Chandan Nagar 25.69 and in Asansol 30.42%. A total of 19,36,462 voters are supposed to cast their vote for 227 wards of 4 municipal corporations. In Tamil Nadu, polls for urban local bodies will be held on the 19th of this month. Elections will be held in 21 corporations, 138 municipalities and 490 town panchayats. A total of 57,778 candidates are in the fray for the 12,607 posts across the state. A report.
As the local body polls are being held after 10 years, canvassing for the urban local body election in Tamil Nadu has reached a feverish pitch. The contestants range from youngsters below 30 years to 94-year-old social activists. In this multi-cornered contest, parties have been vociferous in spreading their word by all means through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and the age-old door-to-door campaigning with pamphlets in their hands. The district officials have started distributing booth slips to voters in all areas. Flag marches, voters awareness campaigns, COVID vaccination camps have become normal in COVID times. bribes. Election observers are on the lookout for violation of Model Code of Conduct and unaccounted money distribution. Sensitive polling booths will be monitored by micro-observers, including bank officials. All polling booths are fitted with CCTV cameras, and live streaming will also be done in vulnerable critical booths. Joy, AIR News, Chennai.
Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Dr. Virendra Kumar has said the government is committed towards bringing in self-confidence and sense of security in transgender community and those engaged in the act of begging. He was speaking after inaugurating the ambitious SMILE Support for Marginalized Individual for Livelihood and Enterprise scheme of the Centre for this community in New Delhi today. The minister said the scheme with skill training and modern education will definitely enable transgender community to move forward with the mainstream, and this will signify the vision of Prime Minister Narendra Modi of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
जीवन की आपाधापी की दौड़ में आप अकेले नहीं हैं। आपके प्रति भेदभाव समाप्त हो, आप आत्मविश्वास से पूर्ण होकर शासन की योजनाओं का लाभ लेकर, वो प्रशिक्षण लेकर आप जीवन में आगे बढ़ें, समाज को सशक्तिकरण देने का काम आप करें। देश के विकास में आप सबका योगदान जुड़े, और इसी के लिए स्माइल योजना को बनाया गया है। आने वाले समय में ये योजना आप सबके बहुआयामी व्यक्तित्व के विकास के लिए और सक्षमता के साथ में आपके साथ में खड़ी हुई है। सरकार की प्रतिबद्धता को औपचारिक बनाने के लिए उस सरकार ने जो अम्ब्रेला स्माइल स्कीम बनाई है, ये इनके कल्याण और पुनर्वास के लिए एक केंद्रीय योजना के रूप में काम करेगी।
AIR correspondent reports that the umbrella scheme of the government is designed to provide welfare measures to the transgender community and the people engaged in the act of begging. The ministry has allocated 365 crore rupees for the scheme from 2021-22 to 2025-26. It includes two sub-schemes, Central Sector Scheme for Comprehensive Rehabilitation for Welfare of Transgender Persons and Central Sector Scheme for Comprehensive Rehabilitation of Persons engaged in the act of begging. The scheme strengthens and expands the reach of the rights that give the targeted group the necessary legal protection and a promise to a secured life. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has welcomed the reopening of the Australian border, which will help stranded Indian students and visa holders to return to Australia. Australia is set to open its border for fully vaccinated tourists and all visa holders almost 2 years after borders were first closed due to COVID-19. Addressing a joint press conference with his Australian counterpart Marie Spain in Melbourne, Dr. Jaishankar said it will help those who have been in India waiting to return to Australia, especially students, temporary visa holders and separated families, and this is something which is greatly appreciated. Dr. Jaishankar said the discussion with his Australian counterpart was very comprehensive and very fruitful. He said both sides looked at a very wide range of topics concerning the bilateral, regional and global partnership.
We discussed briefly today progress in our defense and security cooperation, which reflects our growing strategic convergence. The inaugural Cyber Framework Dialogue was particularly useful in reviewing our joint activities under our framework agreement. We discussed some of our shared challenges and opportunities for closer collaboration in this very important domain. We shared concerns about terrorism and extremism. We have serious concerns about continuing cross-border terrorism, and it's our shared endeavor to deepen counter-terrorism cooperation, including in the multilateral fora.
Dr. Jaishankar said India and Australia have committed to build more trusted and resilient supply chains and ensuring broad and inclusive growth in the Indo-Pacific.
We spoke at some length about regional and multilateral matters, global issues as well. There was an exchange of view on South Asia, on Southeast Asia, on the Indo-Pacific region. And I emphasized that as liberal democracies, we would continue to work towards a rule-based international order, freedom of navigation in international waters, promoting connectivity.
Australian Foreign Minister Marie Spain announced Maitri Scholars Program, under which it will provide over $11 million for 4 years to support Indian students to study in Australia's world-leading universities.
We'll support mid-career Australian and Indian professionals to collaborate on strategic research initiatives. The Maitri program is a strong positive for the education sector in Australia, recovering from the economic impacts of COVID-19 as it is. I look forward to seeing the Maitri program and the Australia-India Infrastructure Forum grow in the coming years.
U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has released its long-awaited Indo-Pacific strategy. The document focuses on building collective capacity to deal with challenges in the region, China's assertiveness, the pandemic, and climate change, among others. The strategy document said the U.S. will continue to support India's rise and regional leadership, working with India bilaterally and through groups on a range of issues. It refers to India as a like-minded partner and driving force in the Quad. The Indo-Pacific Strategic Report was released as part of the Quad Ministerial with foreign ministers of Australia, India, Japan and the US yesterday. The ministers expressed concerns over the malign Chinese role in the region. The report said that India faces significant geopolitical challenges from China and its behavior on the line of actual control. The report added the Chinese coercion spans the globe, but it is most acute in the Indo-Pacific. A senior White House official told a news agency that on the condition of anonymity that India faces very significant challenges. China's behavior on the line of actual control has had a galvanizing impact on India. The External Affairs Ministry has said motivated comments on India's internal issues are not welcome. The statement came in the wake of the comments made by some countries on dress code in some educational institutions in Karnataka. Official spokesperson of External Affairs Ministry Arindam Bagchi today said a matter regarding dress code in some educational institutions in Karnataka is under judicial examination by the Honorable High Court of Karnataka. He said the country's constitutional framework and mechanisms as well as democratic ethos and polity are the context in which issues are considered and resolved. He said those who know India well would have a proper appreciation of these realities. You are listening to the Midday News on All India Radio. A reminder of the headlines before we move on. Campaigning comes to close at 6 p.m. this evening for single-phase assembly polls in Uttarakhand and Goa and second phase of voting in Uttar Pradesh. Support for marginalized individuals for livelihood and enterprise SMILE scheme launched in New Delhi. The central scheme to provide welfare measures to transgenders and people engaged in the act of begging. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds talks with Australian counterpart Marise Payne, discusses wide range of bilateral issues. US announces Indo-Pacific strategy to support India's continued rise and regional leadership, expresses concern over Chinese role in the region. India says motivated comments by some countries on dress code in some educational institutions in Karnataka are not welcome. An assistant commandant of CRPF killed and one Jawan injured in an encounter with Maoists in Chhattisgarh. Nationwide COVID vaccination drive reaches over 172 crore 29 lakh doses mark. And in women's cricket, New Zealand defeat India by 62 runs in the first ODI at Queenstown. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to the Midday News. Over 172 crore 29 lakh doses of COVID vaccines have been administered in the country under the nationwide vaccination drive so far. The Union Health and Family Welfare Ministry today said more than 46 lakh 82,000 COVID vaccine doses were administered in the last 24 hours. The country reported over 50,000 new COVID cases in the same period. Currently, India's active caseload stands at 6 lakh 10,443. The ministry said more than 1,36,000 COVID patients have recovered during the last 24 hours and the national recovery rate stands at 97.37%. Responding to the appeal of Kiribati seeking offers of support to manage its first COVID-19 outbreak, India has sent a consignment of medical supplies containing PPEs and medications to the Pacific Island country. Despite the logistical challenges in reaching the isolated Pacific Island country, the medical supplies from India were put together and dispatched in a short span of time. The consignment reached Kiribati today on board a flight coordinated by the Australian government. In Chhattisgarh, an assistant commandant of CRPF was killed and one Jawan was injured in an encounter with Maoists. More from our correspondent.
A team of 168th Battalion of CRPF was on a search operation in Basagoda area of Bijapur district in Bastar division today morning. Maoists ambushed the CRPF team near Putkel village. Maoists opened indiscriminate fire on the Jawans, leading to a fierce gun battle. In this encounter, an assistant commandant Shanti Bhushan Tirki was killed while another Jawan was injured. After the incident, additional reinforcements were immediately rushed to the spot. Vikalp Shukla, AIR News, Raipur.
As our nation celebrates the 75th year of independence, a series of events are being organized by the government as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. To commemorate the occasion as a Janutsav, All India Radio News brings its listeners a special quiz on India's freedom movement and its glorious history. The quiz is being conducted every Monday and Tuesday in Morning News. And now, let's listen to our special program Azadi Ka Safar, highlighting the importance of the day during the freedom struggle.
Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. Birth of a Nation. India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. AIR News brings you a glimpse of the struggle every day. It was on 12 February 1922 that Gandhiji called off the non-cooperation movement.
After the Chauri Chaura incident, Gandhiji realized that the people were still not ready for a sustained non-violent movement. He did not want the movement to degenerate into a violent struggle between the police and angry mob. Gandhi appealed to the people to leave the path of violence and went on a fast.
I will fast as a penance for my part in arousing such emotions, and I will not stop until they stop.
He decided to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. Gandhiji believed that after a certain duration of struggle, there should be a resting phase during which people could recover the power and rise again more powerfully. Thus, on 12 February 1922, the Congress leaders met at Bardoli and a resolution to stop the non-cooperation movement was put to vote. With the passage of this Bardoli resolution, the non-cooperation movement ended formally.
February is also the day when the Bardoli Satyagraha was started in 1928. In 1925, the Bardoli Taluka in Surat, district of Gujarat, was hit by famine and the farmers were adversely affected. Ignoring the plight of the farmers, the British government in the Bombay Presidency increased the tax rates by 30%. Despite petitions and appeals from the farmers to review this unjust hike in tax rates, the government decided to go ahead with tax collection.
In January 1928, the Gujarati activists Narhari Parikh, Ravi Shankar Vyas and Mohanlal Pandya talked to farmers and solicited the help of Vallabhbhai Patel. Patel had earlier guided Gujarat's farmers during the Kheda struggle of 1918. Patel agreed to take on the leadership role only after getting assurances from the farmers of the resolve to the movement. While addressing a gathering of farmers, Vallabhbhai Patel said,
"I still ask you to think twice before you take the plunge. Forget me and forget my companions. Fight if you feel that you must resist oppression and injustice. Do not take the plunge lightly. If you miserably fail, you will not rise again for several years. But if you succeed, you will have done much to lay the foundations of Swaraj."
Finally, in a meeting of farmers at Bardoli on 12th February, it was resolved not to pay the revised assessment a no tax campaign was launched.
During the no tax campaign, the taxpayers did not pay the revenue even at the cost of attachment of their property. They boycotted government officers and remained absent from farms. Farmers resisted eviction and confiscation in unique ways. They had informers in the government offices who would give prior information as to if and when a Japti notice was going to be carried out. The whole village would then move to another place, and the officers would be faced with an empty village when they arrived to confiscate the property.
The volunteers came from across the castes and classes. They also worked for the betterment of the landless labourers. A large number of women also took active part in the movement. Although the movement was local, it received nationwide attention and support.
Fearing things could go out of hand, the British government set up the Maxwell Broomfield Commission to look into the matter. Finally, the raise in tax rate was reduced to 6.03%, and the peasants were returned their confiscated land.
Sardar Patel credited Gandhiji's teachings and the undying resolve of farmers for the success of the Bardoli Satyagraha. People across the nation recognized his vital leadership. It was women of Bardoli who bestowed Vallabhbhai Patel with the title Sardar.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. See you in the next episode tomorrow.
Best wishes to all consumers for Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Hallmark ensures purity of gold. Always purchase Hallmark gold jewelry. For any consumer-related complaints, please contact National Consumer Helpline toll-free number 14404. Issued in public interest by Department of Consumer Affairs, Government of India, Jago Grahak Jago. President Joe Biden signed an order to free $7 billion in Afghan assets, now frozen in the U.S. The money will be split between humanitarian aid for poverty-stricken Afghanistan and a fund for September 11 victims, still seeking relief for the terror attacks that killed thousands and shocked the world. No money would be immediately released, but Biden's order calls for banks to provide $3.5 billion of the frozen amount to a trust fund for distribution through humanitarian groups for Afghan relief and basic needs. Britain has asked its nationals in Ukraine to leave the country in the next 48 hours, as Russia could invade any day now. The UK Foreign Office's warning came as the US said that Russia is ready to invade the country. The US also issued advisory yesterday to their citizens asking them to leave Ukraine. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Russia was in the position to be able to mount a major military operation in Ukraine any day now, and it could start with an intense aerial bombing.
We are continuing to reduce the size of our embassy footprint in Kyiv. Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible, and in any event in the next 24 to 48 hours. If you stay, you are assuming risk, with no guarantee that there will be any other opportunity to leave, and there no prospect of a U.S. military evacuation in the event of a Russian invasion.
On the other hand, Moscow has been repeatedly denying any plans to invade Ukraine despite amassing more than 100,000 troops near the border.
In women's cricket, New Zealand defeated India by 62 runs in the first one-day international in Queenstown. Chasing a target of 276 runs set by New Zealand, India were all out for 213 in 49.4 overs. And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Campaigning comes to a close at 6 p.m. this evening for single-phase assembly polls in Uttarakhand and Goa and second phase of voting in Uttar Pradesh. Support for marginalized individuals for livelihood and enterprise SMILE scheme launched in New Delhi. Central scheme to provide welfare measures to transgenders and people engaged in the act of begging. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds talks with Australian counterpart Marie Payne, discusses wide range of bilateral issues. U.S. announces Indo-Pacific strategy to support India's continued rise and regional leadership, expresses concern over Chinese role in the region. India says motivated comments by some countries on dress code in some educational institutions in Karnataka are not welcome. U.S. President Joe Biden signs order to freeze $7 billion in Afghan assets now frozen in the U.S. The money will be split between aid for Afghanistan and fund for September 11 victims. And with that, we end the midday news.